Welcome to the 100 Master Coaches series featuring master coaches from around the world. Let's journey together on this 100 Master Coaches series, with your host, Coach Mel, MCC. Priya Ramesh is an ICF Master Certified Coach, Advanced Certification in Team Coaching, and Senior Practitioner of the European Mentoring and Coaching Council. Ramesh Sreedharan is a seasoned business leader, with 3 decades of working with multinational organizations, in senior business leadership roles. He is also an ICF Master Certified Coach and has an advanced certification in team coaching. Together, both Priya and Ramesh are founders of 𝒂𝒂𝒒𝒂𝒂𝒂, Center for Leadership Excellence, a boutique coaching firm that offers curated interventions with an emphasis on emotional intelligence and embracing authenticity in leadership. Now on to the show.
Hello, and welcome to the 100 Master Coaches show. Today we have a beautiful couple as guests, Priya and Ramesh from India. Both amazing master coaches. Would you please welcome them and give them a big round of applause? Welcome to the show.
Thank you, Mel. It's a pleasure to be here.
Absolutely. Thank you.
You know, people will be wondering, how come for the first time, Mel, you are interviewing not just one master coach, but 2? And perhaps they're also wondering, what is the relationship between that? We won't answer all of that at a go, but first and foremost, we would like to get to know you a little bit better. So, Priya, over to you. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Thank you, Mel. As always, a pleasure to have this conversation. So I had a very short stint in the corporate space. My background is in psychology and economics. And as I went through life, if you may call it that, I sort of pivoted wherever was necessary, doing what felt right at that moment. And what I figured out after a couple of years is that there was one common thread running through the entire kind of work or the body of work that I've done, which is working with people, which is empowering people. And so I think that's my space. That's how I sort of found myself doing a lot more of that. And so with this short span with the corporate world, I sort of moved out because we moved countries, and I moved into counseling and therapy. So there was a short span I worked with little children, and I figured that little children, basically the challenges that they have is a manifestation of what happens at home.
That's right.
So then I moved into psychology, got my master's in psychology, applied psychology, and realized, okay, I like working with adults, which means that I'm able to empower an entire family. And then about 15 years of practice in that space, and Ramesh here got into coaching himself, and he said, this looks a lot like what you normally do. Want to just give it a try? And I figured that, this is great. So it was a very organic journey, Mel, to what I'm doing today and where I started. And it's never moved away from helping. It never moved away from helping people find their own greatness.
Yeah.
That's been the theme right through.
That's simply amazing. And everything connects the dots with people. I love that. Ramesh, tell us your story.
My story is actually quite the opposite. I come from a pure corporate world with very, very left brain jobs, right? The only thing I knew is that when I reached 50, I would not be doing that anymore. That's the only clarity I had in life. And I didn't know what I would do after 50. But it so happened, fortunately for me, and see, Mel, the interesting thing with everything to do with our lives has been that like Priya said, it's been organic. There has never been any planning in terms of where we want to be, where we want to go.
Yeah.
It just so happened that the organization that I was working for decided to look at coaching as an option for leadership development, right? And that's the first time I'm hearing about it. And this was probably about 2 or 3 years before I actually quit my job, right? So that's how new I am to coaching in that sense. It excited me. So I actually signed up as a internal coach, and they got me, got my training started. So I started training with the organization. And then I sort of realized it's a very interesting space. It's not very different from, and though I said left brain, I used to manage large teams, right? And it is not very different from, it is working with people finally, right? And it is, so it got more scientific. It started probably feeling much better. I started realizing what I was actually doing, which was probably not, so that awareness was what, got created in me, and that probably changed life. And then when I hit 50, I sort of knew what I wanted. And then that's the rest of the story is, your ICF certification and all that started off.
That's wonderful as well. And for those who are still wondering, why are they both being interviewed today? Well, okay, let's let the cat out of the bag. They are husband and wife. Yes.
Yes.
A wonderful partnership, right? That has been going on for almost a decade, I think. Sorry, not the marriage. I'm talking about I'm talking about the coaching work that you guys have been, right? Yeah, that's right. Because you guys have been married for a little bit longer than that, I'm sure. I don't know whether you want to review that. But congratulations. My wife and I are both certified as well. But my wife decided to play the back end role. And she does that amazingly well. And she supports the business as well. So we do have a husband and wife tag team somehow also there. But it's just a lot different when both partners are MCCs. Both partners are, in a sense, partners in crime, partners in impact, rather, and making such an amazing difference to people's lives, as we are talking about. It's all about lives, isn't it? So I'd like to find out about how that journey came about, after that corporate gig for you, Ramesh, and after that amazing time working in psychology, working in counseling and all of that for you, Priya, and how it just melted together. And was there a point when you say, we both need to work with each other? I don't know. So tell me about that story.
So Mel, actually, I've always aspired to be part of the corporate world. And this was a sort of a childhood aspiration thing, I think you get a lovely car and you get driven to work and you walk down the corridors and, got a lovely chair.
And wave at everybody. Hello. Good morning. Good morning.
Yeah.
Ramesh did a lot of that, I'm sure.
So so there was that aspiration, but somehow, I went in a certain different direction. I never held on too tight to say this is exactly what and nothing else will do. So I just went with the flow. And now
I think I'll tell you why she went with the flow. So we have 2 wonderful children, Mel.
Oh, beautiful.
And that was Priya's priority.
Yeah.
So corporate life would not have worked with that.
Yeah. So it was a choice where I went.
Yeah.
And what I found is that, I used to work as an external employee assistant in organizations, which means I used to be available for the corporate employees for conversations which are confidential and difficult for them otherwise. So what I found myself doing and happily doing is that I had an outside in view of what was going on in the corporate world, which perhaps if I was in the system, I would not have visibility. So it's just so beautiful that this is where what I bring in, an outside in view.
In view.
And speaking for Ramesh, he was in the system, right?
Yes.
So he had an inside
Inside out.
view. And I thought that was a great synergy for us to be working together.
Ramesh, anything else to add from the inside out view of that?
No, it's just that, I think it's, the opposites, there's a saying which says opposites sort of attract, right? And we are opposites in every sense. In anything that you look at, whether it's the food we like, whether it's the things we like doing, we are completely opposite. But in this, and that's why, I shook my head when you talked about 10 years togetherness, because 30 years and being opposites is not very easy to manage the whole thing, right? 30 years.
Yeah, you got to check. You got to make sure you get the numbers correct. One thing I learned is don't get the numbers wrong.
Absolutely. So, but in this, this work that we do, and by the way, Mel, we do a lot of work together. We work with teams together, right? We bring completely different perspectives, and it just so happened that at the initial part of the whole coaching journey, we got an opportunity to actually start teamwork right up front. And
Nice.
the feedback we got was, we didn't realize what we were doing, of course. I mean, we had never done this before. We just went in, took a chance, and we had some great sponsors in our journey. So that really helped.
Yeah.
But the fact that we were able to bring together completely different perspectives and work with an audience to help them get to where they want made a big difference. So now we actually do a lot of work together.
Yeah.
That is the piece which Priya was actually trying to explain.
And she did it beautifully, and you add the icing on the cake on top of that. So there I can see the synergy between both of you. And I think that is really beautiful. Obviously, there is this saying that in diversity, there is this sense of unity, right? And it is just amazing to see both of you bringing that uniqueness into the play, both. Not one canceling the other, but one building on to the other. And I think that is truly amazing. That's why I'm saying that there is not quite a collaboration like this. Maybe I've not seen it before, but you guys are certainly someone we all should look up to and learn from. Now, I'm just curious. At the start, of course, we all start on the journey, right? We go through this credentialing, ACC, PCC, MCC. Was there like a agreement that you will go first and I will wait and see if you cross the border successfully, I follow suit? There, kind of like you do this and I do this. Tell us how that went for you.
So it was very simple, Mel.
Okay.
Priya loves to study, okay, whatever it is, and it's not very easy being a partner when to be left behind, right? So you tend to try to catch up. That's all it was.
Oh my God. I'm catching the drift now. Don't fall too far behind as well.
Yes.
Make sure you're coming up. Okay. So Priya took the lead on that one. So I'm going to pass the mic to Priya now. So tell us about that journey, because I'm sure there are coaches listening in this podcast and also wondering, the journey it takes. I took a long time to reach to MCC. I had a day job and, all kinds of other excuses I made for myself. Okay. But some people have taken it in a shorter time. Yours was also, I would dare say, not a very long time. So Priya, would you like to share a little bit of your journey?
Yes, Mel. I think my background in psychology and the years I worked as a counselor somehow made it a little easier, because I was familiar with the competencies. I've been working with those competencies, but the structure is slightly different. So there was another orientation that I needed to take when I moved into coaching. And so I wouldn't say it was such a big shift. Okay. Having said that, I think there's also this journey that I always look at coaching as a twofold journey. One is you being able to master the competencies.
That's right.
And the other one is your own personal journey in this whole process, right? So oftentimes I'm very grateful for the clients I have, because every time I am in touch with a client who throws a question at me or reflects on something, or I say something, I said, hey, I think he needs to hear it, but I also need to hear it. It seems like a message for me. So it's been a very a reflective journey, and I've always loved journaling. I've always asked myself questions, and I keep writing and finding my own answers. So this journey has been really about going within.
Wow.
And when you go within, I think you find some answers. And also it's a journey of courage, because you also need to try out a few things to realize, it's all very well if it's in an idea stage, but how do I actually manifest this in terms of behaviors? So it's been a lot of work, inner work, I would say, just as much as it has been getting a grip over the competencies. So for me, the competencies came easier than the work within.
Rightfully said. Often the inner work takes a lifetime. It's not just finish your program and the inner work is done.
Yeah, absolutely.
It is an everyday process. Love for you to talk a little bit more, and either one of you can talk about the reflection work that you just mentioned. I think that's such a essential, I wouldn't say competency, but essential practice as coaches, that we need to take time out for ourselves to reflect about the things that are happening around us, but also to reflect on how the things are impacting the inner person and the questions that are coming up within us because of that, isn't it? And yeah, I'd love to hear your thoughts on that deeper inner work that each coach need to dive into.
So for Priya, if the reflective journey was more important for me, actually the competencies was just as difficult. So I'm probably very well aligned, and I fully understand what you went through, Mel, because I probably went through a similar journey of struggling through those competencies, struggling through the work. I think the most difficult part of change has been the MCC journey. It is. So I don't look at the MCC journey or mastery as mastering competencies, right? It is far more easier to do. It is about sensing, probably, and not only the person in front of you, sensing yourself, which is not very easy for me. I mean, I was never used to it. I've never done it. I mean, it's always been about getting things done and moving ahead and things like that. So that part of the journey was extremely difficult. So I took about 2 years to get there.
Yeah.
And with a lot of support and help from a lot of colleagues, friends, people who are similarly in the same journey, all kinds of things. I mean, we all know what the rigor is, right? But it needed a lot of help. Even today, I need a lot of prep before I actually go into a coaching session. I take at least 15 minutes of prep time before I coach.
And that could be, Ramesh, your version of that inner work, right? That reflection bit that you needed to take for yourself, actually, to kind of get centered, to be ready for being present with your client. Anything to add, Priya?
Yeah, I think what you just said triggered something for me, Mel, which is we often think of ourselves as coaches and what we do in that 1 hour, 1.5 hours. I think it is how we show up there is largely dependent on so many years of work with ourselves, so many hours of our own work with ourselves. So it's not just that you switch it on and then you're there for that 1.5 hours, but how you show up in that 1 hour is largely determined by your journey. And I think it's also about integrating all parts of yourself so you're fully present in the moment.
Yeah. I have a saying, the deeper you go, the greater the impact for the coachee.
Yes.
So it is like this relationship that we have with ourselves and the relationship we have with our coachee. The more we think it's all about just the competencies, you're right, Priya. We're just about the action, and the carrying out those important things, Ramesh, like in the organization, right? Getting things done. I've been in corporate most of my life as well, so I understand that language very well. It's all about the performance. It's all about them meeting the KPIs. And yet there is this bit that goes beyond. And I guess it's in that step of being comfortable as well with your growth, with your learning, with your stretching of your own boundaries. What are your thoughts of that?
Yeah, it kind of makes a lot of sense, Mel. And it sort of takes me back to the time when I actually quit my job and moved into coaching, right? So getting a credential was probably the easiest part of that journey. The fact that you're sort of completely rewiring your life, rewiring who you are, rewiring the way you think about everything around you was more difficult. So a simple thing like, for example, for 35 years, I had I used to get a salary credit in my bank account every month, right?
That's
literally
right.
The first of the month.
That's right.
And that disappears. And
Yeah.
the impact, that psychological impact it has is quite significant. We don't realize it. We know it's going to happen, but we're not ready for it when it really happens.
That's true.
Those changes are very difficult.
Speaking of stretching here, Mel, right? You use the word stretch.
Yes.
And I think for me, the biggest stretch has been to work with the unknown. Yeah, because even if it's a vacation, I need to know when we are starting, when we are reaching, what are we doing along the way, when are we returning?
Yeah.
And here I am completely in this space of unknown when I work with a client. I don't know where the client wants, how the client is going to navigate this.
Yeah.
I'm not sure how, I don't have a plan, right? So I'm just completely navigating the unknown. And at one place, it is scary. At another level, it's completely, what shall I say, liberating and completely, it's magical.
Yeah.
Because you're just flowing. And this structure versus flow, I often, as a mentor coach, you often get asked this question, and how do I just go with the client and still not lose sight of the structure?
Yeah.
I don't think structure and flow are too separate. I think you've got to find the flow in the structure. And when I was able to rephrase that, I think that was a bit of a stretch for me to let go, work with the unknown.
I like to pick up on what, Ramesh, you mentioned before, and how you've been accustomed to that amazing first week of the month, and then you see this magical thing happen in your bank account, right? Obviously, being a coach is one thing, but now realizing, obviously not now, but you realize that being an entrepreneur was a different step forward as well. Tell us a little bit about that journey and how you managed, obviously, through this uncertainty.
One is, of course, doing this together. Clearly, that made a lot of difference.
Yeah.
I don't think, for example, if I had tried to do this on my own, I would have succeeded. If not anything, I certainly wouldn't have taken the trouble to get to an MCC level.
Thank you. This is time to say thank you, Priya.
So, but that initial probably 1.5 to 2 years was psychologically very tough. And what helped me through that journey, apart from being together in the journey, was the fact that I actually had a coach for myself. Wow. And I had a wonderful lady who was my coach. And if not for those conversations, I don't think I would have managed to get through it. I probably would have gone back looking for a job or something of that kind. Right. Wow. So that certainly helped. The second thing which happened, Mel, and sometimes I believe that you need to get into tough situations to really know who you are, right? In the beginning, I talked about sponsors. Actually, both of us didn't realize the amount of goodwill and credibility that we had. So you walk up to somebody and say, this is a new thing we're trying out. We are now coaches. Can we talk about it? We didn't find a single person who actually said no. Conversations were easy to do, and we were welcome everywhere. I mean, to the extent that, and I don't know if you've heard of a city called Hyderabad in India. Okay. We lived there for some time and I worked there for some time. So it just so happened that we decided one day we'll go there and we're starting off on this new journey. Said, why not make use of that opportunity also to try and tell people what we do. So we actually organized a lunch, invited a few people.
Wow.
Everybody we invited turned up. And they wanted to really know what we're doing. Not that we got business out of it, but just the show of support was that powerful.
Wow.
And I don't think we realized the level of credibility we had, the level of friendships we had. We just didn't realize, and I think that's the second thing which really helped. So it was. I till that happened, it was very, very daunting. It was scary. I think once we realized this, things changed a lot. So even today, all our business comes through reference. Everything.
Yeah, I think one thing I would probably share with aspiring coaches is that while we are in this space because of our passion to sort of work with people, help them grow, create impact, I think passion alone is not sufficient to run the whole marathon, if you may call it. Right?
Yeah.
It requires few other, for example, the admin work.
Yeah.
The work related to it. I mean, your wife is taking the,
the more exciting part of the business. I mean, seriously.
True. So I think you need to keep in mind that both have to go in together.
Yeah. That kind of resonated so much. It kind of tells the story that the journey of that 1,000 steps obviously needs to begin with something. And what you're saying, Ramesh, is get people around you connected to that vision, to that purpose that you guys are branching into. So you told your story to the people that, I guess, supported you, wanted to show you that kind of camaraderie, who were there to also encourage you as you took that step out. And then for you, I guess, Priya, it's that whole finding that balance on what roles does one person play, and then there are other roles that maybe not so full frontal, and still needs to be done. Yeah?
Absolutely.
And I agree with you, Ramesh. Women are just amazingly, perfect. Perfect. If I did that, I think we would have failed tremendously. So I'm so glad that we've all partnered well with our beautiful spouses, beautiful in person as well.
Yes. Absolutely.
Grateful.
Did I score some points there? Okay. I'm going to show snippets, obviously, to who and it's so amazing. I would love to ask you so many different angles of questions that are coming in right now. I think at this moment is just trying to track into your journey, and over this, let's call it over this decade, right, of time that you both spent together building this dream, this platform of impact. What will be some nuggets, I think, over that journey for you, Priya, that without this journey, you probably wouldn't have experienced these amazing learnings for yourself, and of course for you as well, Ramesh, after.
I'm grateful, Mel, that I also support people towards their credentialing,
Nice.
because that keeps me in the student mode most of the time, right? So I'm only as good as my next conversation, not even my last.
Wow.
So there's always you've got to keep learning, keep moving.
Yes.
That's something that I hold very dear, and I always say, it's Uber arrives, but we are always arriving. We're all the time
Yes.
moving ahead.
Yeah.
I think the second piece is that not look at coaching as an isolated part of your work. Again, going back to what I said a little earlier, I think it's integrated, with all that you have learned before. For example, a little bit of psychology. I'm a performing artist, so a little bit that comes from there.
Nice.
And I think that's what creates the uniqueness. And for me, I took some time to arrive at that, to say, it's not just this conversation, but all that I have learned, and how does all of that inform me and how I show up as a coach. And it's always about moving forward, always be learning. That's something that has kept me going.
Wonderful. Thank you.
The word that stands out for me, Mel, is mobility. Okay. Our minds actually are our biggest enemies, and the problem with that is that we overthink everything. We try to get everything right before we get into action.
Yeah.
But I don't think life is like that. I somehow find that life or the universe somehow conspires to give you what is right for you, right? But it cannot offer you that until you do something, and so action is far more important. And in a way, that's the other. That's probably what we have done. We've gone in all kinds of meandered in all kinds of directions, and we still continue to. I don't think, like Priya said, I don't think we've arrived in any case. I don't intend to arrive to, but doing something which at that point of time makes sense, just and do it fearlessly. Literally, fear is what probably comes in the way of. And fear is all here, right? It's not a true thing in any case.
That's so beautiful. I know we've probably met lots of leaders along the way, and the leaders obviously face lots of uncertainty, especially in the post-COVID scenario that we're all in, right? And I guess the work that we do as coaches invites us to places where it seems a little foreign, it seems a little unpredictable. And yet, as we grow as coaches, we become more and more comfortable in integrating all of that uncertainty into that space. In comparison, the leaders still are looking for that sense of certainty. So I feel like it's this dichotomy of certainty and uncertainty that they constantly go through. It's like a cycle. What are your thoughts about this when you're faced with a leader, obviously, who needs to deliver, and then a leader that needs to still explore and face those uncertainties that are coming his or her way, especially in this new age that we live in, with so much diversity on top of that? What are your thoughts on that?
So two things, Mel. One is I think we should all be humble enough to accept that we don't have all the answers, which means, how do we find opportunities to sort of harness group wisdom? So the importance of harnessing that becomes more and more important in this scenario. And I think it's going forward, it's not going to be changing at all. It's going to be no different, right?
Yeah.
So the ability to, find that wisdom is one. Second is, I'm reminded of this Irish proverb. I don't remember the exact words, but it sort of says that, a field gets plowed only when you get in there and plow it. Thinking about it is not going to plow the field, right?
Yeah.
So action. So there's no other way to really figure out what's going to happen. You have to create the future yourself, and it is possible to create it. So group wisdom and action is probably the way I look.
Any other thoughts, Priya?
For me, the go-to place is reflection. Often hear of leaders saying, I don't have time, I need to rush, right? So it's like saying, I want to keep driving and going, but I don't have time to fill petrol or diesel in my car. So I think
that's good.
They'll find their answers, perhaps if they can just pay attention to themselves. And that itself solves a lot of ambiguity and uncertainty that they're dealing with. But somehow it feels like doing is everything. While action, I completely agree that action is important, but it's an action that comes out of reflection. It's an awareness-led action, not just action for the sake of action.
That's why you both are in partnership, you see.
I was going to say exactly the same thing.
Ramesh is saying, let's go, let's do this. And okay. That's beautiful. I sometimes ask this question, what would be your bravest moment as a coach? What would it be?
Bravest moment as a coach is actually your next conversation with your client. It is the next one. I think that's the most exciting part of this whole. So if I might call it a profession, I don't even know whether I want to call it a profession, right? But that's probably the most exciting part of it. It's not only the next new client, the same client in the next conversation is so different from what it was earlier. That's being brave, and that's part of the reason I take that 15 minutes to get ready for it, because it is daunting. It is daunting.
You don't say. Yeah. The bravest thing for me would be putting me outside of the conversation. Right? There's I want to know, I'm curious, I'm interested, my question. All of this, if I'm able to place me out of it,
wow.
I think just reminding myself of that, it's a constant reminder. Like I said, it's something that is you don't get it once for all. It's something that you've got to live with, deal with every time in every conversation. The I.
So true, isn't it? We're often at war within ourselves, and perhaps war could be a very strong word, but it is this conversation, dialogue perhaps, that we constantly have within ourselves. Even from the times when I remember when I was a younger coach, I would say, am I good enough? Do I have what it takes to work with this client? And so those, whatever you call it, doubts, limiting beliefs, insecurities, all of that just bottled inside us. And it is obviously unnatural, I would say unnatural, to kind of want to talk about it. Maybe for me, I just perhaps just want to forget about it. I just want to suppress it. I just want to look brave on the outside and just go for it, Ramesh, yeah? Just go for it, hit our head on the wall a little bit and then say, no, it's okay. My head can take the blows. I'll just go for it again. And sometimes we also need that bit where you're saying, Priya, that we need to stop and we need to reflect and we need to in a sense, take count on what is going inside us. What will be your thoughts on how we, not just coaches, but leaders, people listening on this podcast can kind of balance that voices that are happening inside of us and asking for that space to turn up? What do you do?
So I remember, I remember my journey during my ACC leg of the coaching journey. And it so happened that, we used to have role plays and we used to practice coaching with our peers. And it so happened that one of the conversations, I was completely in sync with the client, and we finished, and my mentor said, "Wow, that's an MCC conversation."
Wow.
And that did it for me.
Wow.
That I didn't want to do any more practice. I was so scared that I would not be able to keep that standard. So it became a very strong performance pressure for me, that I did it, and I did it like this, and I want to keep doing this. And if I didn't do that, then I'm not good enough. Then I don't even want to do it, So it was such a big pressure on me, and it took me a while to move out of that performance space to learning space. And when I was able to reframe that, I'm learning. Even if I did well, I'm learning something from that. If I didn't do well, I'm learning something from that. I want to keep hearing this voice saying it's all learning.
Yeah.
I think, a lot of it is to do with, like Priya said, in a way, the word I would use is our ego about who we are, and not being uncomfortable with failure, so to say. And that doesn't work in this space. It is, I think, that acceptance that the moment is created at that moment, just accept it and go with the flow is probably the toughest thing to do.
So talking about voices, right, Mel, and I'm still reflecting on it's a very interesting question, because there will always be these voices. I think half the time, like you said, we sort of ignore it, we brush it aside, we avoid it. But there's a lot of wisdom in that voice. If we can just stop to see, and that, I think, is our moment of growth. And that takes courage, I guess. It takes, we've got to be vulnerable, we've got to be courageous to see it for what it is, be okay with the discomfort, all of that. So I see you, I hear your voice. I hear this voice, and, now what do I do about it? I think that's the moment of change.
And just out of curiosity, do you both take time to share those different voices that you're hearing about maybe a situation that you both are facing? Is that part of your practice? Just wanted to.
Yeah, so the good thing, whatever said and done, is having the ability to have a supervisor at home. Right? It is supervision. But I think the challenge we face, Mel, is that keeping the client confidentiality, because we actually know who our clients are. So making sure, and that's a very, very tricky part of it. So even if we do our own conversations here, how do we do that without compromising client confidentiality is a big part of it. But yes, supervision we do between ourselves quite often.
Yeah. What do you think are some of the things to look out for, perhaps in the next couple of years? Maybe even the things that you are looking forward for coaching.
One thing which is sort of becoming more and more clear is that it's only the collective which can really make an impact. So when I say collective, it is, so as an individual trying to do anything is not very easy, especially when it's, when you're going through an environment of significant change all the time. So coaching the collective probably is something. So, this team, the terms that I use now are team coaching and things like that, which is very, which is quite easy to do in a corporate environment, for example. But how do you still do something of that kind in the society or wherever? So to my mind, I think that's probably one area that will change, has to change if you really want to make an impact.
How about you, Priya?
Yeah, I'm thinking, and Ramesh and I have spoken about this some time back, is also to say that, the real impact is in creating future leaders, which means to say the leaders and the middle management, young leaders, people who've just got into the system perhaps. I think that's an area that has great potential, because then they grow into future leaders in a, I think, far more expansive, far more empowered way. So I'm also seeing that as a useful trend, if you may call it.
That's wonderful. Couple of things there. I hear the collective, the importance of that. I hear the empowerment of the next generation of leaders coming in, obviously, to our workplaces. And I guess if I could just add on to that, I think it's also the language that is impacting the cultures that I notice, because the language is changing. The whole landscape is moving towards more touch points but less personal. And that whole impact of how, in a sense, coaching was perhaps seen as for exclusive leaders and senior leaders, and today it's being expanded as well in the more of that touch points to other people. So I noticed that the language is changing the landscape of what is expected and what the people are also asking for. The younger generation are a lot more open to having a dialogue, being in connection with other people. So I see that as one of those trends that are coming, or is probably here already. What are your thoughts on that?
Completely agree, Mel. And I think it's very similar to what Priya was saying. The ability to work with one is, you're talking about in a more of virtual fashion, the ability to work with broader audiences, larger audiences probably, the ability to do that at a much lower cost. Because if you really want to broaden it, you need to, you can't do it at similar price models anymore. Models have to change.
Absolutely. And it is here right now as you speak. There are also many more coaches coming in, many more coaching schools when we started, and I guess it's all for the better. I think coaching is still, in my opinion, in the infancy stage, even though it's growing by leaps and bounds. But I still sense in the other places that I've been in contact with in Africa and all that, that coaching is just starting to grow also in those areas. How is that in particular with Indian companies?
So, like I was telling you, right, when I heard about coaching for the first time, I heard about it just probably 10 or 12 years back. And I was working for a very large organization, a multinational organization. So in that organization, I had never heard about coaching. So you can imagine how the Indian market was at that point in time. It's changing, but completely agree with you. It's coaching as a market is still very nascent. There is a whole lot of expansion that can happen. So I'm not just talking about numbers. I'm talking about depth, width, all of it, the type of market segments, all of it can expand significantly. And if you notice, the whole language that we three have been using in the last probably an hour we've talked is all about organizations. Most of it has been about organizations, and that's where we work today. But I think there's a whole lot of scope far beyond that.
Yeah, and also in the places where you're Priya exposed to before. Even counseling and therapy has been in those spaces for a while now. And of course, more and more the masses are also beginning to accept what coaching is all about. Priya?
True, and also I think, Mel, there is a, at least consciously we try and do it, but I'm also hearing this language of coaching not really about remedying something that needs to be, it's not about fixing something. I think the language is slowly changing to say this is for the employee's growth. And with that, the dynamics around how people receive and are ready for this, I think really goes leaps and bounds. And I'm saying that because, for example, in the space of coaching, I mean, in the space of counseling and therapy, at least in India, there's still a little bit of a stigma around, oh, I need, something wrong
Yes.
with me and
Yeah.
I need to ask for help.
Yeah.
Two things difficult. One is something wrong with me? Two is asking for help.
Yeah.
I'm hoping that eventually that sort of thing, which was initially the case with coaching, I'm seeing that slowly sort of ease up. And I think that's a good space for us. We often also get asked about young leaders, right, in schools and situations. Can they be groomed, as good leaders using coaching as an intervention? And I think that's a fabulous space because young students are anyway ready for dialogue. They are open and they're quite candid about, there isn't any accumulation of beliefs and that limit them. Still ready to sort of move and learn. So there's a lot of scope in different areas, even outside of organizations. Yeah.
Definitely. I was smiling because you were talking about that conditioned mind that perhaps someone in the corporate, I'll speak for myself, was a little bit too hard a nut to crack, until I started to realize the importance of feedback. And I started to learn that and accept that only when I became a coach. I know 17 years ago, but that whole process began to open up for me. In those days, for me, feedback was feedback, take it, now it's like, let's talk through that feedback, let's build on that feedback, let's be creative and expand on that feedback, so it's not just the feedback but also the feed forward in helping the person, as you say, Priya, grow into that potential. It's just so beautiful. Yeah. Wow, we've talked for quite a bit. I just want to ask, before we bring it to close, what would be your hopes for coaching? Is there a desire that I wish coaching would be more like this? Yeah, love to hear your heart on that.
That's a question I've never thought about. See, I think this profession is about a lot of values which is for the greater good of the community, right? And so I wouldn't even say it's about coaching. So how do we as a community try and get this set of values or ethics or code of ethics, whatever we want to call it, to be adopted by the society itself? Makes life so much more easier. So if I had a wish, that would be the wish. So it's not necessarily around coaching specifically.
I hear you. Thank you. Priya?
I think my wish is that it's a big wish that everyone speaks this language and everyone takes a coaching stance, because it can be powerful in any relationship, I would think. Whether it is family, whether it is work, if you can take that stance, because that stance is a very powerful one. And I think, therefore, together, you can reach a higher level, which you can't possibly do on your own, right? So together, the collective, as we called it. So if more and more people took that stance, I think the world would be a beautiful place.
Definitely. And whether we call it coaching or not, right, Ramesh?
Yeah.
You're saying it's a language, it's perhaps even a lifestyle that people can start adopting, inviting, taking in. I remember that brings me to a thought and how actually coaching changed my life. I often thought that I would, or I was a good parent until I found coaching and realized that I wasn't really empowering my children. I was probably just telling them what I thought and wasn't even listening to them. And I think that relationships and the shifts that I made upon reflection of how I was and what I choose to be as a parent now has been the most dramatic of changes. And that started with me adopting and inviting that into that language and lifestyle and how I work with the best of my relationships. And with that, I think the world will be a better place, at least in my home.
Yeah. And that is the toughest space, I think, Mel, right? Because these are relationships that are precious.
Yeah.
These are relationships that's got a lot of emotions invested in it.
Yeah.
You're not really totally detached because, they are part of you and you feel you are part of them. So there's a lot of, it's a very challenging relationship. And if that can change, I think that takes a lot of courage. And it's a wonderful change that should happen, actually.
It's a beautiful conversation that we're having. I really wish that we could continue and continue. All good things have to come to a little bit of a closure. Would you like to have any last words that you would like to say?
I have a question for you, man.
Okay. All right.
I just love the energy that you bring into this conversation. So I just curious, what do you do to bring in this energy?
You see, every good coach has that curiosity and that question, right? I guess it's about coming into this space and saying, I'm just so grateful for every guest that comes onto the show. I'm just the little fly on the wall, listening to the conversation, watching, learning, absorbing. And I think even in the coaching work that we do, I think that's the best place to start. Just being that fly on the wall, or sometimes I call it being the wallpaper, because the wallpaper, we often forget what was the wallpaper. We don't remember it, right? It's being that so that you remember your place in the conversation. That's how I think always tried very hard as well. Doing those preps like you, Ramesh, to make sure that I remember my place in that conversation.
Wow.
Absolutely.
That's profound.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And for you, what's your closing remark, Priya?
I'm just blown away with what you've said, and it I think reminds me of a word we use in Sanskrit, which is called sakshi. Sakshi means witness.
Wow.
If you can sort of be the witness, not just for yourself and where's my place here, also witness for the other. I think that is a beautiful space. And if we can do that for the client, I think eventually they learn to do it for themselves. And that's lovely. I'm just kind of imagining, visualizing it, Mel. So
That's right.
yeah.
Well, I want to say namaste. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for being on the show. It's been a pleasure just spending this afternoon, morning for you. This has been the 100 Master Coaches show today with Priya and Ramesh. We're signing off saying, take care now. Catch you on the next one. God bless and stay safe wherever you are. Bye for now.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you for having us, Mel.
You're most welcome.
You have been watching the 100 Master Coaches series with your host, Coach Mel, MCC. Brought to you by Catalyst Coach. www.catalystcoach.live. We will be right back with our next Master Coach on the 100 Master Coaches series.